Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the MIT Museum. Let me introduce myself. I'm Paula Hammond. I'm MIT's Executive Vice Provost. I'm also an undergrad, was an undergrad class of '84, grad student, class of '93, and came back as a faculty member in chemical engineering, and I do research in the Koch Institute for Cancer Research. So I really want to start with a tribute to Phil Curry. I am the interim Vice Provost for the Arts, but Phil Curry, who just stepped down from this role on August 31st, gave 19 years of service to the role of Vice Provost for the Arts. Philip was a champion for MIT's artistic ecosystem. He ensured that the arts thrived and are a central part of MIT's educational and research missions. This evening also marks the retirement of a special person, Lila Kinney, Executive Director of Arts Initiatives in the MIT Center for Art, Science, and Technology, CAST. Lila has been instrumental in advancing the arts through cross-school collaborations and strategic leadership. Lila, congratulations on your retirement, and thanks for all of your years of service. Thank you so much. I don't know if Lila's here, can wave. All right. I am thrilled to be here with you all to unveil Janet Echelman's new work, Remembering the Future. Janet created this work during her residency as a distinguished visiting artist at CAST. It is the third major installation born out of a collaboration between the MIT Museum and CAST. And since its inception in 2012, the CAST Visiting Artist Program has brought more than 475 artists through MIT through 139 residencies. This exhibition also launches the museum's first ever thematic season, Time. Over the coming year, Time will connect exhibitions, installations, programs, and community events. Time will offer new perspectives on our evolving relationship with this essential concept. Topics will range from circadian rhythms to time travel to climate change, the focus of the work being launched this evening. One of the things that strikes me about this work is how it invites us to pause, to think for a moment about what can happen in our future. Indeed, the title of the work, Remembering the Future, is also an invitation to reflect and to ask, what does it mean to remember the future? We think about what we can do and what the possibilities of those actions are. Janet worked with Professor Raffaele Ferrari from the Department of Earth, Atmospheric, and Planetary Sciences to guide her climate research for this project. Raffaele knows well that it was an earlier EAPS faculty member, Ed Lorenz, who developed the theory of deterministic chaos that is often called the butterfly effect. The climate system is a chaotic system, so even very small changes in initial conditions can produce dramatically different forecasts. It's why it's so difficult to say with certainty how our climate system will behave in the decades to come, though we have made tremendous progress reducing some of that uncertainty. And so we must remember a range of possible futures, but also strive for a future that recognizes the interconnectedness of all of us to each other, and all of us to the natural world of which we are a part. That is what this sculpture calls on us to do. And thanks to Janet's amazing collaboration with Professor Caitlin Mueller, director of the Building Technology Program at MIT, we can interact with the sculpture and change its form in its digital twin, perhaps a metaphor that the future we remember is still, to a very large degree, a future we can invent. Their work together embodies the spirit of interdisciplinary innovation at MIT that we cherish. I want to thank Janet, Caitlin, and all the collaborators who brought Remembering the Future to life. I also want to express my appreciation for CAST and the museum team in supporting this work. I invite you to engage deeply with the installation and the conversation to follow. Before I close, I want to say that strengthening the relationship between universities and the broader public is a key thing we need to do right now. It is critical that the public understand and engage in science and understand its impact on our lives, our health, and our future. The MIT Museum plays a unique role in connecting science, technology, art, and design with society. Tonight's event exemplifies that mission, inviting all to join in conversations about shaping our shared future. Now, it's my privilege to hand things over to Michael John Gorman, the Mark R. Epstein, class of 1963, director of the MIT Museum and professor of the practice of science, technology, and society. He is the director of this amazing place, the MIT Museum. Michael John will introduce and moderate this evening's panel. Let's welcome Michael John.
Thank you so much, Paula, for the wonderful words of welcome and introduction. And today is a special day. We are thrilled to unveil this new artwork, this installation that I'm sure all of you have already experienced, walked under, looked at, perhaps even interacted with this interactive installation that Paula mentioned, which allows you to test out the different tensions in the structure. But I think it's important that today is also the day of publication of a beautiful book, Radical Softness, about the work of Janet Echelman, edited by Gloria Sutton, who's also with us this evening. Welcome, Gloria. And we will actually have an event to explore the book in more detail a little bit later on October 15th. But this evening we have three wonderful panelists with us. We have, of course, the artist Janet Echelman, who probably needs very little introduction to our audience here. Janet, as was mentioned by Paula, has been a CAST Distinguished Visiting Artist here at MIT, and through that had the opportunity to work with Caitlin Mueller, engineer and architect, and someone who I've really appreciated getting to know here at MIT, and someone who's really interested in these cross-disciplinary collaborations that we love so much. And then David McGee, I have to really thank for springing in to this conversation. I think, was it 24 hours ago?
It might have been 36.
Might have been 36. So David is our recently appointed head of Earth, Environment, and Planetary Sciences here at MIT. So he's head of that department. He's a geochronologist working on the history of the Earth's climate, and so has a really deep area of expertise relevant to the work Remembering the Future by Janet. But thank you. Thanks all of you, and especially to David for springing in. We were sorry that Susan Solomon unfortunately had a last-minute commitment which didn't allow her to participate. We're thrilled to have you with us, David, and I think to have the artist, the engineer, and the climate scientist together is really important for this work. I'm going to begin with a few questions. We will have a chance for you in the audience to also ask your questions via Slido a little bit later in the conversation. But first of all, perhaps to turn to you, Janet, can you share with us a little bit about what you would regard as the artistic vision behind this work, Remembering the Future, and the intent you had behind it as an artist?
Well, this work springs from the personal experience of being overwhelmed by the news about the climate. As a layperson, I feel that there are news articles and data coming at me, and I feel unable to make sense of it, and it leads to a sense of powerlessness. And I think the way I describe it is as if someone were texting you in all caps all the time, and then everyone were texting you in all caps all the time. So it feels like this sense of overwhelm, and I think that at its core, there is pain that is hard to know what to do with. And it sort of makes me want to run away, which I think is we see as a cultural phenomena. We all want to run away from the climate news. And my experience is that, the desire to make this artwork was to create a larger scale of time. David, we were just chatting, that you described most climate maps of now into the future like a hockey stick. But I wanted a larger scope of history, and working with your colleague, Raffaele Ferrari here from MIT, he led me to understand that it's a very dependable scientific record from the last ice age to now. Originally, I wanted to model 200 million years to the present, and then from the present to the future. And when you look at the work, there's a yellow line in the middle, which is pulled taut, and that is the moment of now. And that is the moment where I feel I need to sit and to really feel the loss of what has already been lost and what we know is likely to be lost, that at least in the coming few years, we can't fully stop the ship. And that by experiencing loss and actually feeling it, I believe it can liberate us to have our full agency. All that energy spent running away from this. And so my goal with this artwork, it's something that doesn't tell you what to think. It doesn't tell you what to do. It's not an activist piece in that sense. It's about being able to sit with truth and time.
No, I love the way that you see the work as a way to start conversations rather than to end them, and also to release this sense of agency. Something you mentioned about this moment of the now being pulled taut. I discovered the other day when engaging with Caitlin that when you look at her interactive model of the piece, you actually see that the moment of maximum, the part of maximum tension is actually the present, which is quite poetic, and I hope that means we have less tension to come in the future. But Caitlin, I would like to turn to you now, and can you talk about the engineering innovation that was part of this piece, and really about how the collaborative process with Janet worked, from your collaboration with her when she was a cast visiting artist, and how did your engineering work connect with her artistic practice?
I mean, I think one of the things that's remarkable about Janet is that she is incredibly collaborative, not just with me, but she has a really amazing kind of spectrum of engineers and mathematicians and computer scientists that she's worked with over the years. And I think part of that is because of the technical mystery of her work. Modeling and simulating and understanding the physics of these super complex, incredibly large-scale pieces remains sort of, there are open questions still that remain in that world, which all of us in research and inquiry love. But I think the other part is really, this collaboration is about the softness of the materiality. That's both what makes the sculptures easy in some way, but it's also what makes them really hard. They're not physically hard, but the hardness of knowing what they will look like when you're designing them, how they will carry forces, what shapes they'll take on. That was the fundamental challenge that we were interested in exploring together in this collaboration, because to be an artist, to be an architect, to design, you must anticipate the future. You must know how, when you arrange materials in space, what will they look like? What will the visitor experience be? What's the impact? And yet these systems are very unknowable because of the complex mechanics of the soft elements coming together. So a lot of our work was about thinking about how simulation could be relevant and powerful and transformative to artistic processes by being very fast, by being agile, and really by being a way to have a dialogue between an artist and a tool, rather than impose a solution one way or the other. So the soft structures don't allow you to tell the sculpture what to be. The sculpture uses physics and gravity to find its form. But we also don't want the computer or the simulation or the material itself to tell the artist the only possibility. We want to be able to have agency, as Janet said. And so that process of developing a simulation tool that allows for that creative dialogue and exploration was the crux of our challenge that we took on.
Yeah,
And
did you want to
I
add
just
something?
wanted to add that, you know, you'd look at Caitlin's profession and my profession, and you might not think that there was really an overlap. And I think we actually share the same aesthetic. Like, that is what sort of, I think, the sort of passion of the research is that we're both drawn to finding the most elegant solution, which is the solution with nothing extraneous, nothing unneeded. And that relates to the content of this work in terms of finding a more sustainable future is, I think both of us are committed to finding ways of being in the world that are more elegant because they are more efficient and lighter in their footprint on the planet.
And this work is not a data visualization. It's inspired by climate data, but it's inspired with quite a lot of engagement with climate data and with Raffaele Ferrari was mentioned in the En-ROADS project and simulation. But David, coming to you, so your entire focus is on the Earth's climate history, and what do you think about an artwork that is really telling a story through data, or do you think that climate can, an issue as complex as climate can connect with people in a different way through an artwork, or what is your sense of using climate data to tell stories?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just say, for context, I'm the one who first saw this piece yesterday. I'm sort of coming in fresh, and that's I really value that I have not been thinking about this piece for months and years, and I just want to express my appreciation for it. Just spending the more time I spend with it, the more different facets make themselves apparent that are really rich connections to how I think about climate, how I think about our shared challenge of determining how we respond. To get to your question, I think that it's really powerful to have this conversation with data, mediated through art. My colleagues and I, our day job is to reconstruct what happened in the past with accuracy and precision, and to try to understand why it happened, to improve our understanding of the physics of the system, and then to make projections that are as accurate and as grounded in the fundamental physics as they can be, with also being clear about our uncertainties. That's all really important work, but it doesn't by itself create meaning. Meaning is created socially, with all of you, by gathering people around both the science but also everything else. And that's what this art does that, just plotting the data as a single line doesn't do. And it also points out to me, the way that the temperature curves are not just a single line, but are connected to so many things and are dependent upon, but also affecting and pulling upon other pieces of the work, points out that the climate is more than just temperature, more than just 1.5 or 2 degrees. It's so many other things, from sea level to precipitation extremes and droughts to human migration to political challenges, etc. So, that kind of richness can't come out of just the work that one field is doing.
When we were standing under the work yesterday afternoon at about 4:30, I remember you said something to me which I thought was really interesting and which I hadn't really picked up on before about the work, which was that if one looks at the future part of the work, you've got these 3 scenarios really, and that the hottest, the kind of, as you go up the staircase, the least desirable scenario really is much more constrained, and then the kind of more comfortable scenario has much more space for maneuver. But I thought that was a really astute observation. I'm not sure, was that part of your thinking in creating the work as well, to capture that sense of constraint?
I think that's part of it, but also the sense of the 3 trajectories that we showed pulling apart from each other.
And to come back to the collaboration between the two of you, so there is the software that was generated, but and I think you spoke about a shared aesthetic, and I know, Caitlin, you've been fascinated by the work of Frei Otto and others, and these kind of tension structures as approaches to making buildings, perhaps with fewer materials, perhaps more with a lower carbon footprint embodied in the building structures. But what new ideas emerge from this collaboration for both of you? What new approaches, what innovations which you will then take back with you into your work, Caitlin, or which maybe will transform your next artistic creation, Janet? I mean, maybe start with Caitlin.
Yeah, I think for me there's at least two axes. One is more abstract and the other is more applied. But on the abstract side, a lot of my own personal research, from when I was a student at MIT until now, and with my amazing group of graduate students and postdocs, has kind of fundamentally been about this question of how do we combine the pragmatic and the sublime in a design process. And that's like across the whole built environment. How do we do that for buildings and bridges and infrastructure? And it's a really thorny question because of modern professionalization and specialization and the sort of isolation of disciplines, but also because the sort of forms of representation and communication used in these different realms are so different. And so a lot of our work has been about using computing to be a communication layer or a shared understanding or a shared representation between different ways of knowing and seeing and thinking and interpreting in design. And so this, to me, is one of the most clear examples of how that could succeed. I think the fact that it's in this emergent material system is probably noteworthy and allows us to kind of move beyond what we would expect. But we really feel like we're sort of one. We're the architect, we're the engineer, we're the artist, we're the sort of perceptive audience in one environment. And that's, I think, I count this as a success that motivates me to the future in general across other building systems as well. The other part is really about tensile systems, tensile networks, ropes, flexible materials that, yes, people like Frei Otto have shown can be 90% less material to achieve the same long span for a roof or to make a bridge. And I think those are some of the most amazing structures that humans have created, and yet we see so few of them in the world today. Most of the world is made out of large quantities of brittle materials. Or rigid materials. And so this work with Janet and with our graduate student, Adam Burke, has really led us to say, okay, now that we can do this with a lot of precision, now that we can design these systems, where else can we use them? Can we use them to replace reinforcement in concrete? Can we use them to create really large dynamic solar arrays that have very, very little material required to build them? Can we sort of make deployable structures that sort of can take precise shapes in imprecise conditions? I think we're just starting to open up the imagination there of what's possible. So I think that's been really fun. And actually, Janet and I have had a lot of conversations about those ideas going forward, too.
Yes, like the form the next collaboration could take. But I do want to just contextualize as the non-climate scientist, knowing that 40% of greenhouse gases come from the built environment. It's a big deal if you can reduce the material by 90%. Like what we're both focused on, this is an aesthetic enterprise, but it is much more. The tool itself is about finding equilibrium. It enables, as an artist, it used to be that I would draw the tensioned rope structural layer for my sculpture, and then I would send it off to an engineer, and I would wait a week or two and get it back, and it'd be completely different, and then I'd have to redo it, and it was incredibly slow. It did not allow a lot of artistic development, and the tool that Caitlin and her graduate student Adam Burke, who's here with us tonight, developed enables me in real time to see, to find equilibrium. It's too complex a set of calculations to be done without a tool like this, and we have not been able to do it before. So this is opening up a greater level of geometric complexity. And this piece is the first test of that. So how exciting that MIT Museum enabled our residency to have a physical test, a culmination that is something we can even share with you. That's pretty exciting, and I think we're already talking about like design for solar arrays, and like now that the tool exists, there's so much for me as an artist, but also in other fields. So that it's pretty exciting for us. Yeah.
And I'm still waiting for the first children to begin climbing on the piece. I think that'll be another interesting test. I want to ask you about a little bit about the materials. So, you know, when I first went to your studio, I was kind of thinking, oh, you know, will everything be using silk or spider silk or these kind of biological materials? But you actually work with materials more like nylons and so on. And, you know, sometimes you might think, oh, it'll be, you know, in terms of sustainability, it might be better to use those kind of more natural materials. But can you say a little bit about the material choices and why they have, the materials you use have such important properties to create tension structures?
Well, each fiber that I choose it for its function. I'm frequently using ultra-high molecular weight polyethylene, which is 15 times stronger than steel, pound for pound. It's what NASA uses to tether the Mars rover. And that's what we use for our tensioned rope structures so that they can remain delicate. So it can look delicate, but be fiercely strong. And out in the world, they can withstand a Category 5 hurricane. We also use fibers like PTFE, polytetrafluoroethylene, I'm saying to the chemist, which, you know, is also used to coat astronaut spacesuits because it's impervious to UV ultraviolet rays from the sun. So depending on the need and the environment, we pick the fiber. And in a way, I use nature as my guide. The more I learn about spiders, they don't just use spider silk. They have different silks. The radial lines in a spider's web are of a much stronger fiber, whereas the radial circles that are used to catch the bugs, that's a very thin and sticky fiber. And in the same way, different parts of my sculpture are made of different types of fiber.
Fascinating, thank you. I want to ask you a little bit about the artistic decisions involved in the work. So I remember in some early conversations, shortly after I arrived at the museum, there was conversations about, oh, you know, should we extend the climate timeline so it goes into the T station, you know, really down below ground, and but that turned out not to be completely practical. But I'm wondering, you know, what also in working with the climate data, what decisions were made? You know, how much was data, how much was aesthetics?
Well, and as David said, like the creation of a social project, like an artwork, there was the initial sketch of the history of the climate to the last ice age and these projected futures, which I had recently visited the Sistine Chapel again, and I was thinking about, you know, God's hand reaching out to Adam in the same way. It had that kind of charged feeling, the space between them, which is this moment. But there were many practical decisions that shaped the social space beyond the data inspiration, a lot having to do with the architecture. When I first walked into this museum and I saw that big volume of airspace above the stair, you know, which, you know, seemed like a big, juicy spatial envelope. So it really was the coming together of thinking about how to create a social space, and also the goals of the museum itself, that your goal of reaching out into the world, into the community, to create something really visible to every person coming out of the T-stop, every person walking by, to engage them. So that's part of how we kind of broke a few rules at first, like coming down, you know, typically in the museum, things aren't in a spot where you can touch them. And that was very important to me, that it come close to us and be intimate. And also, it comes close to the window, which makes it also more intimate to every person walking by. And at night, the light that, when you exit, you'll see how light transforms the entry, because you can see those lines of the climate from, up the pathway.
And David, just to turn to you, how these kinds of collaborations between artists and scientists, do you think that that they can help to engage people with a topic as complex and sometimes intimidating as climate change?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, for the scientist, I think there's a moment of letting go, in that you have worked so hard to produce a very accurate time history. And so, obviously, letting go of of that being represented in exact precision is a moment of stepping back, right? But as you said so well, Janet, the topic of climate change is one that, frankly, most of us engage with some amount of dread or just kind of paralysis, and creating something that allows for curiosity, that it moves away from rigidity of thinking, both in its its literal being, but also in its in its philosophy. I think opens up space for conversation that wouldn't otherwise happen. And I think anything that creates space for conversation that otherwise wouldn't happen about this topic is incredibly valuable.
And do you think that these kinds of collaborations between artists, scientists, engineers can go beyond mere metaphor and actually generate solutions? That's really for all of you.
That's for Caitlin.
I mean, I hope so. That's why we're all here, I think. I think I'm a person who's been around MIT for a while, and to me that's sort of the essence of what we're all trying to do at MIT is, develop deep expertise and innovation and new knowledge, but also connect that and apply that and advance that in the real world and through collaborations amongst ourselves, but also with people, like Janet, with people who are making a difference in the world. I mean, to me, I guess this question about whether it's a metaphor or whether it's real, I think, someone like Janet is so interdisciplinary in her own work. She's known as an artist, but she really is an engineer as well. She knows the engineering of her pieces to an intense degree. She has to, and that informs how she works. And so, I think that means that the collaboration does lead to real things because we both have so much shared aesthetic interests, kind of material interests, curiosities that, I do think we might work on a solar panel system in the next 2 or 3 years that will be out there. But I think there's lots of examples like this. I think, one of the things that I value about the arts is, seeing the world in a new way, and that's really central to what we need to do in the future.
Anything to add?
I think what I'm so thrilled about in this piece, one aspect, is that we're talking about the climate, and the way that we're talking about it has within it solutions or potential solutions. And I recently unveiled a permanent work in Texas that is on the migration path of the monarch butterfly, and that is many hundreds of feet. And part of that artwork includes 3,842 plants that support pollinators. It's called Butterfly Rest Stop. So it seems important to me as an artist that we're not just talking about problems, but we're engaging with the issue directly.
I love the idea of like a climate positive artwork. I think that's super exciting. But just to come to the title of the work, Remembering the Future, what does remembering the future as a phrase mean to each of you?
Well, I was going to quote sort of where the title came to me I was reading a quote that is commonly attributed to the Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard. And the quote is, "The most painful state of being is to remember the future, particularly the one you'll never have." And at the time, I had just lost my husband, David Feldman, and this was very resonant for me. And it became really clear to me how the climate, what I talked about at the very beginning of tonight was exactly that. So remembering the future, that there are already futures that we know won't be able to happen, but that this can free us to have our fullest agency to communally act, and we know that's the only way to change things. And the way this sculpture is made is all about interconnected networks. So I think that communal action is part of its manifestation.
Thank you. Caitlin, remembering the future, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, to me, again, I'll connect it back to the act of design, which is also, in some way we're all designing our future collectively, just as one, collaboratively designs a piece. And I really like what you just said about, some doors are closed, and yet that may allow us to find new pathways that we otherwise might not, and find new connections, find new opportunities. And in my world, I think about that as sort of exploring the design space, understanding the landscape of constraints, being clever about how to get around them or find, hop around over the valley to the next hill. And I think this is, to me, really evocative of the fact that we do have agency again, and that these constraints can be not only liberating, but really galvanizing for creative acts. And so I'm hopeful about that.
Mm-hmm. David?
If I may, I'm going to answer this in two ways. One is with my dorky geologist hat on, and I've only been to two. I've only visited personally, rocks that record 2 of the 5 big mass extinctions. But when you're sitting there looking at a layer and realizing what happened in that layer, you can't help but think about, what's our layer going to look like? Looking back from tens of millions of years hence. And then on the personal level, my children's grandchildren, what are they going to think about the choices we made now? And what, how can how can we all make decisions that they would, applaud?
Thank you. I think this is a good moment to open it up to the audience. We have a Slido. There's a barcode on the screen. I don't know, Kate, have there been any questions on the Slido?
Yeah, we've had a lot of questions come in
closer,
already.
Come closer, you're too far away. Don't be shy.
So one question that's been very popular is the opening referenced uncertainty in the climate system. Can the panelists please reflect on how uncertainty in how humans act on climate may be the biggest uncertainty?
Who would like to? Maybe David, do you want to?
Sure. I mean, right. So that we have projections of the future and these diverging curves. There is uncertainty for a certain future of emissions. There is some uncertainty in exactly how much the world will warm, how much extremes will change, how much sea levels will rise. But the biggest difference is between those different trajectories, which is about our decisions as humans. And as a climate scientist, what keeps me up at night, or what worries me more, are the nonlinearities, the unexpecteds in the human system, and how we react as a political system, as a community, to future climate change. Mm-hmm. Of course, I'm concerned about the physical system and ecological systems too, but the human system is particularly brittle.
And do you want to maybe say something about the big new climate project at MIT that you're part of?
Sure.
I think it's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really exciting initiative that I've been privileged to be a part of for the last couple of years, for the Climate Grand Challenges and now the Climate Project. And the exciting thing about it is the way that it brings together people from different departments all over campus, talking about the shared problems that relate to climate change, rather than attacking them in disciplinary silos. And it's been incredibly exciting to, be sitting in rooms with, graduate students and postdocs and faculty members and research scientists from urban studies and planning and from civil and environmental engineering, from architecture, from, my department, Earth, Atmospheric, and Planetary Sciences, all kind of circled around the problem rather than thinking about just our little slice of it. I think it's what MIT does best, I think, is focusing on the problems rather than worrying too much about which particular discipline they fall under.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Do we have any more questions from the audience?
Yeah, there are a lot of questions about the making of the piece and the installation of it. Can you take us through that process?
Well, I talked to you about the initial inspiration, that drawing and elevation, but then we came to the very specifics of the architecture. There are only certain points on certain beams and certain places in the wall where we can attach. And so one of the essential qualities the tool gives us is this ability to find the precise geometry that will be in equilibrium. And so that is part of the making of the piece. And then if the question is also about the crafting, we are using really old technology, like the kind that have been passed down generation to generation of, like, the yellow lines you see are spliced by hand. So that is a very old technology for livelihood that fishermen and sailors used, and their lives depended on it. So each of the twines of the different colors you see, I custom braid myself with multiple different colors of fiber within them, and each of those fibers responds differently to different hues of colored light, which change very, very slowly at the speed of a sunset. Nature is my touch point. So on the craft level, I mean, here we are using the newest computational tools that are tackling these thorny challenges of soft body modeling, and at the same time using these really old methods. And I think in a way that is grounding, because as human beings, I think there is this sense that technology is somehow cutting us off from ourselves or leading to isolation and, and depression. And but I think the artwork is really a reminder of the fact that new tools and old tools work really well together, that we don't have to discard our physical analog past.
And maybe I'll just add one thing. That was an unexpected thing that I learned way more than I expected about from this collaboration, and specifically from the CAST Distinguished Visiting Artist Residency, that we were able to teach multiple workshops during January's Independent Activities period with a ton of different MIT students from across MIT on we made a lot of large-scale, full-scale prototypes of this piece together with MIT students, sitting on the floor with our legs crossed, splicing with these ancient tools to make these large-scale pieces. And I often are like, oh, somebody will make this, but by making it myself and working with other people making it, it was really interesting. It was, in some ways less hard than I thought. It really demystified the process, and also, there's a lot of things you start to think about by doing that craft. And it's also extremely meditative. So if anyone wants a fun activity in the winter, I highly recommend rope splicing.
Fantastic. Do we have one final question from the audience, Kate?
Sure. This visitor noted that the MIT area audience is probably already mostly climate believers, if not activists. They're wondering how we can reach a broader audience with this piece.
Great question. Any thoughts?
I think that one thing that keeps away non-believers is sort of a didactic message or finger wagging. And this piece doesn't do that. So I'm hopeful that this piece might welcome in somebody off the subway because they just look at it and it looks really intriguing. Mm-hmm. Maybe they don't know it's about climate. And I think as David was talking about, like if it, or actually it was you, Michael John, that if it leads to questions, then that is, I think, the only tool I have to bring more people into dialogue. And I think the frame, the lack of a didactic message, hopefully will invite many people in who aren't typically involved. That's my hope, anyway.
I've visited the MIT Museum with my daughter's class, and I think I'm excited about the many school children who come through here every week, and the fact that they'll see this piece as they're going up to the maker spaces, et cetera, and perhaps be able to have conversations about it.
Yeah, and I think, of course, Cambridge is a bit of a bubble. I think we all realize that. But, the MIT Museum, we also organize, for example, the Science Festival Alliance and the Science Event Summit, which involves people from all over the US and these local events practitioners that are organizing their small science festivals. As you may know, we have the Cambridge Science Festival here, which is actually on this Sunday with the Cambridge Science Carnival. So we'll have 20,000 people outside the building on Sunday. You're all very welcome to that. But I think it's important also for places like us to work with people around the country and to whether we can bring Janet's work around the country remains to be seen. But I think it connects with such interesting different traditions, from making fishing nets, as you're saying, to splicing and knotting, as well as rethinking build structures. So I think it has something very powerful, but I think we haven't yet thought of how this particular work might be something that we can really take on the road. Of course, Caitlin's wonderful software is going to be online, so that will actually, there will be a way to experience the work online for people who can come to Cambridge.
And I can just add one quick thing, which is, Kurt Newton from MIT Open Learning is here, and Desiree Plata and I were just talking about online climate education. And I think one of the questions is how to that Kurt has been thinking a lot about is how to do online education in a way that doesn't have people shut down as soon as you get started, that kind of encourages this openness of thinking and curiosity and possibility, rather than, as you say, finger wagging.
Well, I think we're almost out of time. We will have a chance. We'll have a reception, which you're warmly invited to over in Essential MIT. There will be, for those of you who've been excited by tonight's event and would like to dive further into the topic of soft structures, we will have an event on October 15th, so very soon, around the new book about Janet's work, with a really interesting panel. But just before we close, I would like to ask our panelists, if they think of somebody coming into the museum maybe for the first time and being underneath this amazing new work, what would you like them to take away with them? And also, what would you like everybody to take away from this evening's conversation? So maybe I'll start with you, Janet, and go to the others.
I hope that each of you and each person who visits gets a moment of quiet contemplation in that moment of now. And hopefully that might release some of our latent energy and agency.
Amazing. Caitlin.
Yeah, for me, I'm hoping that everyone can experience the kind of miracle of minimal abundance that this piece represents. So achieving this incredibly joyful and generous and exuberant impact with almost no material. And really through that process, suggesting ways forward that we can be joyful and minimal at the same time.
And David, if someone is coming here and has their appetite whetted and their curiosity piqued to learn more about climate and to dive a little bit more into what MIT is doing around climate, how could they take that further?
Yeah, absolutely. Right, MIT has a huge amount of programming around climate, and the the Climate Project is just starting to sort of unveil some of its activities. Our department has a lecture, the Carlson Lecture at the New England Aquarium coming up in October. So look for that. Carrie Emanuel, a professor emeritus at MIT, who's done some of the seminal work on hurricanes and how they respond to climate change, will be speaking. He's a great speaker, and so I really highly recommend that as maybe a next step for learning more about the Earth system and climate change.
Great. Well, please enjoy the work, enjoy the En-ROAD simulation, enjoy the digital simulation of the work, and enjoy the reception. And I would really like to thank my amazing panelists, Janet Echelman, Caitlin Mueller, and David McGee for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael John.
And thank you for coming.